We are all familiar with this famous scene. It is said that the wreck of the Titanic lies deep in the northern Atlantic Ocean. However, few people know that there are 6 mysteries related to this deadly accident that have not yet been solved. Stay tuned until the end of the video. You will be shocked to learn about these mysterious incidents. The first terrifying event related to this deadly accident occurred on the same day the Titanic sank. Before setting sail on the fateful journey, a lifeboat drill was scheduled for that day. However, for some unknown reason, the captain canceled the drill, which turned out to be a bad decision. The real reason for the cancellation of this drill is still unknown. Some reports say the crew members were busy cleaning the ship that day, and the captain did not want to interrupt them. While there were rumors that he wanted to surprise the passengers by not holding the exercise, none of this could be confirmed. In any case, after the drill was canceled, chaos broke loose on the ship. When the lifeboats were dropped into the water, the passengers got scared, thinking that the drill was taking place. Many passengers refused to leave the ship. They were convinced it was just part of the drill. Since no drill had been carried out before, the lifeboats were almost empty, and this resulted in the death of most passengers. Had the drill been carried out as planned, the passengers would have been well versed in the evacuation procedure and would have saved many lives. Did you know that when the Titanic sank, it did not go down immediately? In fact, the ship remained afloat for 2 hours. The bow of the ship went down first, causing the stern to rise in the air. Most people do not know that the stern section of the Titanic still exists, but the front part has decomposed. The entire ship was destroyed within 2 days. The stern rose so high in the air that several lifeboats passed under it. Many people, including women and children, died on the stern section. They were unable to enter the lifeboats because the lifeboats were passing over their heads. To add to this horror, many survivors reported seeing lifeboats approaching. But then they continued on their way without realizing that there were people in the water waving frantically. Survivors were forced to watch as the lifeboats moved further away, offering them false hope before leaving them in the freezing waters. Another disturbing fact related to this tragedy is that, although the captain was responsible for the safety of his passengers, he never sounded the alarm. It's hard to imagine that the captain was aware that his passengers were about to die, but he still did nothing to help them. He might have assumed that the ship could not sink. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't have done anything. The captain sent 2 telegrams that night alerting other ships to the presence of icebergs. However, he never told the passengers or crew that the ship had collided with an iceberg and was leaking. This is very suspicious considering that the captain was fully aware that the ship was in serious trouble, and was expected to take measures to ensure the safety of his passengers. He had received many complaints from the crew about the amount of ice in the ocean that night, but he decided to ignore them and instead try to reach New York as soon as possible. Sadly, the captain paid the ultimate price for his poor judgment and died along with his passengers. It's also worth noting that the lifeboats were all placed on one side of the ship, which made evacuation difficult. Furthermore, the passengers were not informed of the evacuation procedure, which added to the panic. All of this was due to the cancellation of the drill. But what was the main reason for the cancellation? There are conflicting opinions on this matter. Investigation concluded that the crew knew the evacuation plan well, and that the drill was unnecessary. However, survivors recalled that the crew panicked when the alarms were sounded, indicating that they were not familiar with the evacuation process. So which version is true? We will never know. When people think of the sinking of the Titanic, they often forget that there were 3 classes of passengers on board. First class was considered the best, while third class was the worst. The third-class passengers had to sleep in bunk beds and share bathrooms, while the first-class passengers enjoyed spacious rooms with private bathrooms. It's hard to believe that the first-class passengers would face discrimination, but this actually happened on the Titanic. When the ship sank, many third-class passengers were locked in their cabins. They didn't have access to lifeboats, and therefore had to wait until their cabins were flooded to evacuate. Many people assume that those in charge locked the third-class passengers in their cabins to prevent them from taking over the first-class lifeboats. However, we don't know for sure if this is true. There is speculation that the third-class passengers were trapped in their cabins because the staff thought the ship would stay afloat, and the passengers could evacuate after it reached life. Another theory is that, since the third-class passengers were mostly immigrants, the staff simply assumed they would not want to leave the ship. Many of the victims of this tragedy were not found for weeks. The bodies were in such poor condition that they were not recognized. Those who did survive were traumatized and had to receive psychological treatment. Funerals were held for those whose bodies were recovered, but many of the victims' families refused to accept compensation from the White Star Line. They believed that the line was solely responsible for the deaths of their loved ones and demanded justice. We are now at the halfway mark. If you have enjoyed this video so far, please support us by subscribing so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Now let's move on to the next mystery. Did you know that the Titanic was not supposed to be sailing that night? Well, it turns out that a similar disaster had occurred just a few days before the Titanic sank. An author named Morgan Robertson wrote The Wreck of the Titan. The story is identical to that of the Titanic, except that he wrote it 14 years before the Titanic sank. Robertson wrote the story based on a dream he had about a ship sinking after colliding with an iceberg. He published the story in the Saturday Evening Post magazine, but it was ignored. It was only after the Titanic sank that people realized the story was eerily similar to the actual event. Many people believe that Robertson predicted the sinking of the Titanic, but he himself denied it. He claimed that he had written the story based on a dream he had, but there is no proof to support this claim. In fact, some people believe that the story was planted in the magazine by someone working for the White Star Line to warn people about the dangers of sailing on the ship. However, this conspiracy theory is not widely accepted. As mentioned earlier, the Titanic was carrying passengers from different social classes. There was a clear division between first class, second class. The wealthy passengers in first class enjoyed luxuries that are unimaginable today, such as smoking cigars indoors and having separate dining times based on their preferences. There was even a special menu for dogs traveling in first class. Meanwhile, the third-class passengers had a much more miserable journey. They slept in crowded dormitories and ate whatever food was given to them. The crew members also had a tough time. They worked long hours and were often deprived of rest. Their meals consisted of stale bread and cheap meat. The ship's cook was constantly reprimanded for serving low-quality food to the crew. Crew members also complained about the cold temperatures on board the ship. They tried to fix it by opening windows, but the sharp winter wind made it impossible. In the end, they had to endure the freezing conditions. This brings us to the most important question: why did the Titanic sink? As mentioned earlier, there were many reasons for the tragedy. The ship's crew ignored many warning signs, including the captain's previous warnings about icebergs. Moreover, the lookout failed to spot the iceberg in time, and the helmsman made a wrong turn, causing the collision. All of this could have been avoided had the crew been more attentive. But human error was not the only cause. The ship's design was also to blame. The Titanic was built with a double bottom to prevent leaks. However, this system was ineffective because the compartments were not properly sealed. When the ship hit the iceberg, water leaked into the lower compartments, causing the vessel to sink. If the ship's compartments had been properly sealed, it might have stayed afloat long enough for the passengers and crew to be rescued. In conclusion, the sinking of the Titanic was not caused by a single factor, but by a combination of circumstances. Human error, bad luck, and unforeseen events all played a role in this tragedy. The sinking of the Titanic was a pivotal moment in maritime history. It led to major changes in shipping laws and regulations, such as requiring ships to carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board and establishing the International Ice Patrol to monitor icebergs in the North Atlantic. It's a reminder of the power of nature and the importance of preparedness and vigilance. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on our latest videos. Thank you for watching.